Thugs harass a young woman, unaware that her father is a dangerous CIA agent. The evening sun dipped below the horizon as Emma Daniels strolled through the city park, her earbuds firmly in place, playing a mix of her favorite acoustic songs. It was her routine, a way to unwind after work and clear her mind of the stress that often clouded her thoughts. As she walked past the fountain, she noticed a group of 4 men gathered near the benches. They were loud, their laughter sharp and obnoxious, but Emma brushed it off. She dealt with enough catcalls in her life to know that ignoring was often the best option. But tonight, ignoring wasn't going to cut it. One of the men, a wiry figure with a tattoo crawling up his neck, spotted her. His face lit up with a sinister grin. "Hey, sweetheart," he called, his voice carrying over the fading sounds of the park. Emma quickened her pace, pretending not to hear him. "Don't be rude now, we're just trying to have a little fun," he jeered, his tone laced with mockery. The footsteps behind her quickened. Her heart thumped harder, but she refused to look back. She'd read enough self-defense guides to know showing fear was a mistake. But fear was creeping in, and fast. "Hey, I'm talking to you!" Another voice, deeper and more commanding, barked. The men caught up to her near a dimly lit path, blocking her way forward. "Nice camera," one of them said, pointing to the vintage Nikon hanging around her neck. "You a photographer or something? Wanna take my picture?" "Excuse me, I just want to get home," Emma said firmly, gripping her phone tightly in her hand. Her voice betrayed the nerves clawing at her throat. "Home?" the tattooed man said, stepping closer. "Why rush? We're just getting to know each other." Emma scanned her surroundings, but there was no one nearby. The men moved in closer, their laughter echoing around her, and her mind raced for options. Before she could act, one of them snatched the strap of her camera. "Hey!" she yelled, adrenaline surging as she reached for it. The man jerked it out of her reach, holding it up like a trophy. "Relax, we're just playing." Emma lunged for her camera, but another man stepped behind her, blocking her escape. "Smile for the camera," the tattooed man sneered, pulling out his phone to record. "Say something nice for all the people watching." "Stop it!" Emma shouted, panic overtaking her. She tried to wrestle free, but the others laughed harder, egging each other on. "World's gonna love this," the man filming said. "What's your Insta? Maybe we'll tag you." Emma's fight-or-flight instincts took over. She stomped hard on the foot of the man behind her and elbowed him in the ribs, breaking free just enough to bolt down the path. The men jeered and cursed behind her, but she didn't stop running. When she finally reached the safety of a nearby coffee shop, her hands were trembling so hard she could barely dial 911. But when she glanced at her phone, she froze. The video was already online. Her face, her panic, her humiliation, it was all there, plastered on social media for the world to see. Within minutes, hateful comments piled up beneath the video. Her breath hitched. She felt trapped, her reality crashing into the virtual world where strangers mocked her pain. Hours later, Emma sat curled up on her bed, staring at her laptop screen. The video had gone viral, racking up thousands of views and endless ridicule. Her phone buzzed incessantly with notifications, each one a fresh jab at her dignity. She felt hollow, her world spinning out of control. The sound of a car pulling into the driveway made her flinch. She glanced out the window and saw her father's familiar black sedan. Jack Daniels wasn't just a father. He was a retired CIA operative with a reputation for getting the job done, no matter the cost. He was supposed to be enjoying his retirement, spending quiet evenings in his workshop or playing chess with Emma. But tonight, he wasn't smiling when he walked through the door. "Emma?" he called out, his voice steady but tinged with concern. When he found her in her room, her tear-streaked face told him everything he needed to know. "What happened?" he asked, kneeling in front of her. His sharp eyes scanned her face for answers. Emma hesitated, her shame and fear bubbling to the surface. "It's nothing, Dad," she mumbled, trying to avoid his gaze. "Don't lie to me," Jack said softly but firmly. "Tell me the truth." Emma swallowed hard, then turned her laptop to show him the video. Jack's jaw clenched as he watched, his hands gripping the edge of the desk so tightly his knuckles turned white. "Who are they?" he asked, his tone colder than she'd ever heard. "I don't know," Emma admitted, her voice shaking. They just started harassing me. And then they filmed it and..." She choked on her words, unable to continue. Jack closed the laptop, his expression dark. "Do you know where they were?" he asked. "The park," Emma whispered. "Why?" Jack stood, his shoulders squared. "Because no one humiliates my daughter and gets away with it." "Dad, please don't," Emma began, but Jack was already walking toward the door. His calm demeanor had shifted into something else, something dangerous. In his home office, Jack powered up his old laptop and accessed tools most people didn't even know existed. Surveillance networks, facial recognition software, and GPS tracking systems were just the beginning. Within minutes, he had identified the ringleader of the group, Marcus Reed, a small-time thug with a long history of petty crime and a penchant for social media stunts. Jack leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled in thought. What mattered was teaching him and his crew a lesson they'd never forget. He picked up his phone and dialed a number he hadn't called in years. "I need a favor," he said to the person on the other end. "Something clean but thorough. And I need it fast." Marcus was laughing with his crew in a dingy apartment, scrolling through comments on their viral video. "We're killing it," he said, showing the screen to his friends. "She's probably crying herself to sleep right now." But as Marcus scrolled, his phone buzzed with an unknown number. He ignored it, but it buzzed again. And again. Finally, he answered, irritation in his voice. "Who the hell is this?" A low, steady voice replied. "Your worst nightmare." Marcus laughed nervously. "Is this some kind of prank?" The voice didn't falter. "You think this is funny? Posting that video? Hurting my daughter?" Marcus froze, the color draining from his face. "Wait. Who is this?" "You'll find out soon enough," Jack said. "Enjoy your 15 minutes of fame. They're about to end." The call ended, leaving Marcus in stunned silence. His friends laughed it off, but Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible was about to happen. Emma woke up the next morning with her phone vibrating endlessly on her nightstand. The sunlight poured in through the curtains, but it did nothing to lift the heavy weight pressing down on her chest. She didn't want to get out of bed. The world outside felt too loud, too cruel, and too unforgiving. Grabbing her phone, she scrolled through the messages. 150 new notifications. Her heart sank. She knew better than to look, but curiosity won. After reading the comments, Emma shut off her phone and tossed it across the bed, burying her face in her hands. She couldn't understand how strangers could be so heartless. They didn't know her. They didn't know what really happened. Her father's voice startled her. "Emma." Jack stood in the doorway, dressed in jeans and a dark gray jacket. He looked calm, too calm. But there was something in his eyes, a storm brewing beneath the surface. Emma wiped her face quickly. "What?" Jack held up her phone. "Why'd you turn off your location sharing?" "Because I didn't want anyone knowing where I was." "That's not how this works," he said, his voice sharper than she was used to. "If something like this happens again, I need to be able to find you immediately." Emma's temper flared. "I can take care of myself, Dad." "No, you can't," Jack snapped, the softness in his voice gone. "And that's okay. But you don't have to face this alone. You're my daughter, Emma. And those men..." He stopped, his fists clenching at his sides. Emma's anger dissolved, replaced by guilt. She could see it in his eyes. He wasn't just mad. He was scared. "Dad," she said quietly, "don't do anything crazy." Jack sat on the edge of her bed. "What would you have me do? Sit back and let them get away with it? Let them humiliate you for the world to see? They're just jerks," she muttered. "They'll move on to someone else soon enough." "And that's the problem," Jack replied, his voice low. "They'll move on. And it'll happen again. Not just to you, but to someone else. I can't let that happen. Emma looked at him, her eyes wide. What are you going to do? Jack didn't answer. Instead, he stood and walked out of the room, leaving Emma with a sinking feeling in her chest. Jack sat in his office, his computer screens lit up with profiles and maps. He had tracked Marcus Reed and his gang to a cheap, rundown apartment complex across town. The building was already flagged in criminal databases, illegal gambling, stolen cars. It was a haven for lowlifes. As he pieced together their movements, something nagged at him. One of the thugs, Ryan Kane, had a familiar face. Jack's fingers flew across the keyboard, accessing CIA archives. Within seconds, the file popped up. Ryan Kane, suspected cartel affiliate. Former informant. Last seen working for a weapons smuggling ring 3 years ago. Jack's stomach twisted. This wasn't just random street thugs messing around. Kane had connections. Dangerous ones. Jack's phone buzzed. It was his old contact, Sam Winters, a retired CIA tech expert. I pulled what you asked for, Sam said. Facial recognition confirmed Kane's identity. And you're not gonna like this, he's still on the cartel's payroll. Jack's grip tightened. How deep is he? Deep enough. He's low-level muscle, but he's working for someone big. If you're thinking about taking him down, be careful. This guy's not afraid to get dirty. Jack stared at the screen, his jaw tight. Thanks, Sam. Wait, Jack. Are you sure about this? It's not just Kane you'll be dealing with. This could escalate. Jack's voice was ice cold. It already has. Marcus Reed leaned back in his chair, feet propped up on the stained coffee table. The glow of the television flickered across his face as he scrolled through his phone, soaking in the comments under the video. Man, this thing's still blowing up, he said, laughing. We're practically famous now. Ryan Kane, sitting in the corner, didn't look amused. You sure about this? I told you to lay low after that video. Marcus rolled his eyes. Relax. What's one little video gonna do? She's probably crying herself to sleep. Not like anyone's coming after us. Ryan didn't answer. His phone buzzed, and he frowned. A text from an unknown number. I'm watching. His blood ran cold. You guys getting weird texts? He asked, his voice uneasy. No. Why? Ryan didn't answer, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. He checked the locks on the doors and windows twice before sitting back down. Jack parked his car a block away from the apartment complex. He stepped out, adjusting his gloves and pulling up the hood of his jacket. His heart pounded, but it wasn't fear. It was focus. He moved silently through the shadows, placing small motion detectors at the building's entrances. The thugs wouldn't even notice them, but Jack would know every move they made. Inside the apartment, Marcus laughed as he popped open another beer. To us, boys! Viral kings! Suddenly, the lights flickered. Then they went out. What the hell? Marcus said, looking around. Kane, check the breaker. Kane grabbed a flashlight, heading toward the back of the apartment. But the hallway was too quiet. Too still. When he turned the corner, a figure emerged from the shadows. Before Kane could react, a fist connected with his jaw, dropping him to the floor. Jack leaned down, whispering, That's one. Marcus was still laughing when Kane's body was thrown through the door. Blood trickled from his nose, and his eyes were wide with terror. But Kane ran away as quickly as he could. What the? Marcus jumped up, grabbing a baseball bat. A voice echoed from the darkness. You think this is a joke? The other men scrambled, looking for weapons. The lights flickered again, and Jack stepped into the room, his face partially hidden by the shadows. You made a mistake, he said calmly. You should have stayed in your lane. Marcus's cocky demeanor evaporated. Who the hell are you? The father of the girl you thought you could humiliate? Jack growled. The room erupted into chaos as Jack moved like a ghost, taking down the men one by one. Marcus fled through the back door, but Jack let him run. This wasn't over yet. Marcus Reed sprinted through the darkened alley behind the apartment complex, his chest heaving with panic. Sweat poured down his face as he fumbled with his phone, trying to call someone, anyone, for help. But his hands trembled too much to dial, and the screen slipped from his fingers, shattering against the pavement. "Damn it!" he hissed, crouching to pick it up. Behind him, footsteps echoed. Slow. Deliberate. Marcus froze. The hairs on the back of his neck stood up. He turned, his eyes scanning the alley, but saw nothing except shadows. "Marcus!" The voice came from nowhere and everywhere all at once. He spun wildly, gripping the bat he'd stolen from the apartment. "Who's there?" No answer. Just silence. Then, the street lamp above him flickered to life. Standing at the edge of the alley was Jack Daniels, calm, steady, and deadly. His face remained half hidden under the shadow of his hood, but his presence alone radiated menace. "You're in way over your head, Marcus," Jack said, taking a step closer. Marcus raised the bat. "Stay back, man! You don't want this fight." Jack didn't flinch. "That's where you're wrong." Before Marcus could react, Jack lunged. The bat swung, but Jack sidestepped effortlessly, twisting Marcus's arm and sending the weapon clattering to the ground. In one swift motion, Jack slammed him against the brick wall, pinning him by the throat. "Where are the others?" Jack's voice was low but sharp. "W what?" Marcus stammered. "Your crew. Where are they hiding?" Jack tightened his grip. "You've got 5 seconds." "I don't know," Marcus gasped. "Kane was the one who set this up. He had contacts." Jack's eyes narrowed. "Contacts? Who?" "I don't know his name. Some guy with cartel ties. He said we'd get paid to make the video go viral. Said it was part of a bigger plan." Jack's stomach dropped. A bigger plan? This wasn't just petty harassment anymore. It was calculated. Organized. And it was tied to the cartel. He released Marcus, letting him fall to the ground. "Don't move," Jack ordered, pulling out his phone. Miles away, a dimly lit room buzzed with the hum of servers and monitors. At the center, a man in a tailored suit leaned back in his chair, sipping whiskey as he watched the grainy security footage from the apartment complex. "Looks like we've drawn the wrong kind of attention," he muttered. Behind him, a younger man shifted nervously. "Sir, should we pull out?" "No." The older man smiled coldly. "This Jack Daniels. He's interesting. Let's see what he does next." Jack dragged Marcus into a nearby abandoned warehouse, zip-tying him to a chair. He paced the room, his mind racing. If the cartel was involved, this was bigger than Emma. It was about power. Control. But why use a random video to stir chaos? Pulling out his laptop, Jack connected to his surveillance network. Using Marcus's phone data, he tracked recent locations and call logs. One address popped up repeatedly, a storage yard on the outskirts of the city. Jack sent the coordinates to his old CIA contact, Sam. "That's not a storage yard, it's a front. Weapons trafficking. High-level cartel activity," said Sam. "How fast can you get me blueprints?" asked Jack. "Give me 20 minutes," Sam replied. While waiting, Jack turned back to Marcus. "How many people are there?" Marcus shook his head. "I don't know. Kane handled all that." Jack leaned in closer. "You're lying." "I swear," Marcus cried. Jack pulled out a knife and slammed it into the chair's armrest, inches from Marcus's hand. "Tell me everything, or I'll make sure you regret it." Terrified, Marcus spilled the truth. Kane said it was a test. The video was bait, to see how people reacted. They wanted to measure fear, push boundaries. They planned more kidnappings, ransom videos, anything to make headlines. Jack's jaw clenched. Jack left Marcus tied up and called the police, tipping them off about the apartment and the gang's criminal activity. It was a distraction, a way to keep law enforcement occupied while he dealt with the real threat. Armed with blueprints from Sam, Jack prepared his gear, night vision goggles, silencers, and a tactical knife. This wouldn't be a loud fight. It had to be surgical. Before leaving, he called Emma. "Dad?" Her voice trembled. "You're safe, Emma. I promise you. But I need you to trust me." "Where are you going?" "To end this." The yard was surrounded by chain-link fences topped with barbed wire. Guard dogs barked in the distance, and armed men patrolled the area. It was a fortress. But Jack had faced worse. Slipping past the cameras, he disabled the locks and crept inside, taking down the first guard with a chokehold. Using the man's earpiece, he listened in. Moving deeper into the yard, Jack discovered crates filled with weapons and bags of cash. This wasn't just a gang operation, it was cartel-backed smuggling. He set explosives on the crates as insurance before continuing. In the main office, Kane was counting stacks of money when the lights cut out. "What the hell?" he growled, pulling out a pistol. The radio crackled. "Kane." Jack's voice filled the room. Kane spun, aiming blindly. "Who's there?" "You didn't think this would end with a viral video, did you?" Kane fired into the shadows, but Jack was already behind him. With a swift motion, he disarmed Kane, slamming him into the desk. "Where's the cartel contact?" Jack demanded. "I don't know." Kane spat blood. Jack twisted his arm. "Wrong answer." Okay. He's in town. But he doesn't know you're coming." Jack smirked. "He will now." Jack left Kane tied to the chair as he walked out of the yard, detonating the explosives remotely. Fire and smoke lit up the night sky as the cartel's operation crumbled. The police would clean up what was left. Jack had bigger problems now. The cartel wasn't finished. Jack pulled into his driveway just before dawn. The house was dark, but Emma was waiting for him, perched nervously on the couch. Her eyes widened when she saw his bruised knuckles and torn jacket. "Dad?" she asked, her voice trembling. "It's done," Jack said, forcing calm into his tone. "For now." Emma exhaled sharply, relief washing over her. "Does this mean it's over?" "No," Jack said, shaking his head. "It's just starting." Emma stared at him, fear flickering in her eyes. "What do you mean?" Jack sat down, pulling a chair closer to her. "Marcus and his crew weren't acting alone. This goes deeper, cartel deep. And they're not going to let this go." Emma's face paled. "What do we do?" "We make sure they never get close again." Jack's voice was firm, but Emma could see something else behind his words, an anger that burned dangerously close to the surface. Later that morning, Jack was in his office reviewing security footage from his hidden cameras when his old contact, Sam Winters, called. "You lit a match," Sam said without preamble. "I didn't have a choice," Jack replied. "Well, now the fire's spreading. The cartel's moving in hard. I intercepted chatter. They're bringing in a fixer." Jack's breath hitched. "Who?" "Code name, Santiago," Sam said grimly. "Ex-military. Known for tracking people down and making them disappear." Jack leaned back, tension creeping into his chest. Santiago wasn't just muscle, he was a hunter. "Send me everything you have," Jack said. Sam hesitated. "Jack, you might want to pull Emma out of there." "No," Jack said firmly. "This ends here." Jack spent the next several hours transforming his home and the surrounding area into a battlefield. Motion sensors, cameras, booby traps. He knew Santiago would come, and he wouldn't come alone. Emma helped where she could, moving furniture, stacking supplies, but the weight of the situation gnawed at her. "Why can't we just leave, Dad?" she asked at one point. "Because running only makes us easier targets," Jack replied. "We make them come to us, on our terms." Emma didn't argue. But as she watched her father check the wiring on a pressure sensor hidden by the front porch, she realized just how far he was willing to go. And it scared her. By nightfall, Jack's network alerted him, 3 black SUVs moving toward their neighborhood. They cut their headlights as they approached, gliding like predators in the dark. "Here we go," Jack muttered, activating the perimeter defenses. He turned to Emma. "Stay inside. Lock the doors. If anything happens, go to the basement, and don't come out until I say so. Emma nodded, fear etched into her face. Be careful. Jack kissed her forehead. Always. The cartel men moved silently, dressed in black tactical gear. But Jack saw them coming. Through infrared cameras, he watched their movements as they split into teams. Smart. But not smart enough. The first man tripped a motion sensor by the garden. A shotgun rigged to a tripwire blasted out, shattering the night's silence. The man dropped instantly. Panic rippled through the others. They froze, scanning the dark for threats. Jack took advantage of the chaos. Moving through the shadows, he took down the second man with a suppressed pistol, leaving his body hidden near the fence. The cartel radio crackled with panic. 2 down! Stay alert! From the lead SUV, Santiago emerged. He was older than Jack remembered, gray at the temples, but still built like a tank. Unlike his men, Santiago wasn't panicked. He moved slowly, methodically, scanning the area. Jack watched through the camera feed. Come on, Santiago. Let's see what you've got. Santiago knelt beside one of the fallen men, examining the wound. He glanced at the nearest camera and smiled. Santiago didn't wait. He sent his men toward the house, forcing Jack to retreat inside. This was the real fight. As the first man breached the front door, he triggered a flashbang rigged to the entrance. The explosion of light and sound sent him sprawling, but Santiago's second wave pushed through, firing blindly. Jack ducked behind cover, returning fire with brutal precision. He dropped 2 more men, but Santiago was still outside, watching, waiting. Jack turned toward Emma. Basement. Now! Emma hesitated but obeyed, vanishing down the stairs. Jack took out the last of Santiago's men before the fixer himself entered. They locked eyes across the living room. Jack Daniels, Santiago said, his accent heavy but clear. You've been busy. You should have stayed retired, Jack replied, aiming his gun. So should you. Santiago moved first, knocking the gun from Jack's hand and sending it skidding across the floor. Jack struck back, but Santiago was stronger, driving him into the wall. The fight was brutal: punches, broken furniture, and shattered glass. Jack's training gave him an edge, but Santiago's raw strength made every second a struggle. Finally, Jack grabbed a shard of glass and drove it into Santiago's leg. The fixer roared in pain, giving Jack just enough time to grab his pistol and aim. It's over, Jack growled. Santiago smirked. For now. Jack hit Santiago so hard that he became unconscious. The fight was over, but Jack knew it wasn't the end. Santiago's men were dead, but the cartel wouldn't stop. This was only a warning shot, and Jack had fired back. Emma emerged from the basement, tears in her eyes. Dad? Jack didn't answer immediately. He bent down, rifling through Santiago's pockets, pulling out a phone, encrypted, but nothing Jack couldn't handle. He wiped the blood off his hands and looked up at her. No, he said grimly. It's not over. Not yet. Jack dragged Santiago's limp body toward the basement. Emma followed cautiously, fear flickering in her eyes. Why are we taking him down there? She asked. Because Santiago's not the one calling the shots, Jack replied without looking at her. He's just the knife. I need the hand that's holding it. In the dim light of the basement, Santiago stirred. He groaned as Jack zip-tied his hands to a chair and slapped him awake. Rise and shine, Jack said coldly. Santiago's eyes snapped open. He sneered at Jack despite the blood trickling down his face. You're making a mistake, Daniels. No, Santiago. The mistake was coming after my daughter. Jack leaned in, his voice deadly. Now we're going to talk. And if you don't, well... He pulled out a small hunting knife and pressed it against Santiago's neck. I've got time. Santiago smirked. You're too soft. You won't do it. Jack's grip tightened. Try me. After several agonizing minutes, Santiago finally cracked. They're coming, he spat. More men. Stronger, Faster. You can't stop them. Who sent you? Jack demanded. Santiago hesitated. Answer me! Jack roared, slamming the knife into the chair's armrest. Diego Vargas. Santiago gasped. He's running this operation. He wanted to use your daughter as leverage, to bring you out of hiding. Said you owed him. Jack's stomach dropped. Vargas. Diego Vargas wasn't just another cartel boss. He was the man Jack had betrayed during his final mission before retirement. Jack had dismantled Vargas's drug routes, burned millions in product, and left him on the run. It seemed Vargas had never forgiven him. Where is he? Jack's voice was ice. You think I'd tell you? Santiago sneered. Even if you kill me, it won't stop him. Vargas doesn't leave loose ends. Jack smirked. Neither do I. With one swift motion, Jack knocked Santiago out cold and turned to Emma. We're not running, he said. We're ending this. Jack spent the next few hours digging into Santiago's encrypted phone. Messages, call logs, and voice memos painted a clear picture. Vargas was operating from a penthouse apartment in the city, using Marcus Reed as his local foot soldier. Jack formulated his plan. It wouldn't be enough to take Vargas out quietly. He needed to make an example of him, public humiliation, just like what they'd done to Emma. He rigged Santiago's phone to live stream directly to Vargas's encrypted server and set up cameras in a makeshift studio in the basement. Tied to a chair under harsh lights, Santiago regained consciousness. He squinted against the glare, his face pale. What are you doing? He hissed. Jack leaned over, adjusting the camera. I'm giving your boss a show. He hit live. The camera feed broadcasted directly to Vargas's private network. Within seconds, Vargas's face appeared on the screen. He was calm, but his eyes betrayed fury. Daniels, Vargas said, his voice smooth but venomous. You've made a mistake. No, Jack replied. You did. You came after my daughter. Now the world gets to see what happens when you push me. Jack turned the camera to Santiago, who squirmed in his seat. Say hi to your boss, Jack said, forcing Santiago to look directly into the lens. Vargas's calm demeanor faltered. Let him go, Jack. This doesn't have to end badly. Oh, it already has, Jack snapped. And now everyone's going to see the truth. Jack pressed a button, and a pre-recorded video began to play, evidence of Vargas's trafficking, weapons deals, and violent orders, all pulled from Santiago's phone. The broadcast spread across the web within minutes. In his penthouse, Vargas smashed his laptop, fury boiling over. He barked orders at his men. Shut it down! He screamed. Find him! But it was too late. The cartel's operations were now exposed to law enforcement and rival gangs alike. Vargas's power was crumbling. Back in the basement, Santiago's arrogance dissolved as he realized what had happened. You just signed your death warrant, he hissed. No, Jack replied, stepping closer. I signed yours. He untied Santiago just enough to let him stand, shoving him toward the door. You can go, Jack said, his voice cold. But they're coming for you now. Santiago's eyes widened as the reality sank in. He ran, disappearing into the night, only to be gunned down by Vargas's own men hours later. Emma stood outside as the sun began to rise, watching the news alerts flood in, Vargas exposed, his cartel in shambles. But she still felt uneasy. You did it, she said, looking at her father. Jack didn't smile. Not yet. Vargas is still out there. Emma shook her head. No. We did it. For the first time, Jack saw a different side of his daughter, a fighter. The fear in her eyes had been replaced by determination. Good, he said. Because this isn't over. As Emma and Jack prepared to move to a safe house, Jack's phone buzzed with a new message, an unknown number. You think you've won? I'm not done with you, Daniels. Neither is she. Attached was a photo of Emma, taken from her social media account, clearly recent. Jack's jaw tightened. Vargas was still out there. And he was watching. The sun crept over the horizon, casting long shadows across the Daniels' home. The night's chaos had left scars, broken furniture, bloodstains, and bullet holes. But the battle wasn't over yet. Not for Jack. And certainly not for Emma. Jack sat at the kitchen table, his eyes glued to the photo of Emma that Vargas had sent. It wasn't just a threat, it was a declaration of war. Emma's safety was hanging by a thread, and Jack knew Vargas wouldn't stop until he had his revenge. "You're not going anywhere without me," Emma said firmly, stepping into the room. Jack looked up, startled. "No. Absolutely not. It's too dangerous." Emma crossed her arms. "Too dangerous? After everything I've been through? You've taught me that hiding doesn't work, and I'm done being scared. I'm not a victim, Dad." Jack saw it in her eyes, determination. He exhaled slowly, nodding. "Then we end this. Together." Jack knew Vargas's resources were depleted after the broadcast, but the cartel boss was still dangerous. He'd be desperate. And desperate men made mistakes. Jack baited Vargas with a final message. "Let's settle this. No more hiding." The reply came quickly. "Abandoned shipyard. Midnight. Come alone, or she dies." Jack's blood boiled. Vargas didn't just want revenge, he wanted to make it personal. "We're not playing by his rules," Jack said, turning to Emma. "We're making him play by ours." Jack set up his gear, drones, motion sensors, and explosives hidden throughout the shipyard. He showed Emma how to operate the surveillance feeds remotely, giving her control from a safe distance. "Dad?" Emma hesitated. "What if this goes wrong?" Jack cupped her face. "Then we make sure it doesn't. I need you sharp, Emma. You've already survived more than most people ever could. You're stronger than you think." Emma nodded, her fear hardening into focus. The shipyard was massive, rows of rusting cargo containers stacked like tombstones. Shadows stretched long under the flickering floodlights. Jack moved quietly, his eyes scanning for Vargas's men. From her position in a nearby van, Emma monitored the cameras. "Dad, there's movement by the docks," she whispered into the comm. "Got it," Jack replied, sliding into cover behind a crate. 2 cartel soldiers patrolled the perimeter. Jack dropped the first with a silenced shot and took the second down in hand-to-hand combat. Emma flinched as she watched, but she didn't look away. "This is working," she whispered to herself. But then something changed. "Dad, wait." Emma's voice trembled. "There's more coming. A lot more." Jack ducked into the shadows as a convoy of black SUVs pulled into the shipyard. Vargas stepped out, flanked by heavily armed men. "Jack!" Vargas's voice boomed through the yard. "You've cost me a lot. Now it's time to pay up." Jack gritted his teeth. "He's mine," he whispered to Emma. "Keep an eye on the cameras. If things go south, get out." "No," Emma said. "I'm not leaving." Jack didn't argue. Instead, he crept closer, using the stacked containers as cover. But Vargas wasn't playing games anymore. "Come out, Jack, or we'll bring her to you," Vargas called, raising his phone. A live feed showed Emma's face. Her heart skipped a beat. "Dad?" Jack froze. Vargas had someone watching Emma, someone close. Before Jack could warn her, the van door flew open, and a cartel soldier yanked Emma out. She screamed, but she didn't panic. Remembering her father's training, Emma stomped on the man's foot and jabbed her elbow into his ribs. He staggered, but before she could run, he grabbed her arm. Emma's instincts kicked in. She reached for the pepper spray in her pocket and unleashed it into his eyes. He screamed, releasing her long enough for her to grab his gun. "Dad, I'm okay," she shouted into the comm, aiming the gun at the soldier as he stumbled. Jack heard her and smiled. "That's my girl." Using the distraction Emma caused, Jack moved in. He set off small explosives, sending panic rippling through Vargas's men. The chaos gave him the opening he needed. One by one, Jack picked them off, silently, efficiently. The closer he got to Vargas, the louder his pulse pounded in his ears. Finally, it was just the two of them. "Daniels," Vargas sneered, his gun raised. "You don't have the guts to finish this." Jack stepped closer, his own gun steady. "You came after my daughter. You thought you could use her to get to me." Vargas smirked. "And it worked." "Not for long." Jack fired. Vargas crumpled to the ground, his arrogance bleeding out with him. Emma ran toward Jack, her face streaked with dirt and tears. "Dad!" He caught her in his arms, holding her tightly. "You're safe," he whispered. They walked out of the shipyard together, the rising sun painting the sky in shades of gold. Behind them, the authorities arrived, responding to anonymous tips Jack had planted earlier. Days later, Emma stood in front of her mirror, staring at her reflection. The girl who'd once hidden from the world was gone. In her place stood someone stronger, someone ready to face whatever came next. Jack walked in, his arm healing from the bruises and cuts. "You okay?" Emma turned and smiled. "Yeah. I think I am." Jack sat beside her. "What you did at the shipyard, that wasn't just brave. It was smart." Emma shrugged. "Guess I take after you." Jack's face softened. "No. You're better than me." As Emma scrolled through her phone, a notification popped up. Anonymous message. Her stomach flipped as she opened it. "Vargas was just the beginning. We're still watching. We'll be coming soon." Emma's hands trembled, but then she took a breath and deleted the message. She turned to Jack, her voice steady. "Let them come." Jack smiled faintly, proud but uneasy. Because he knew the fight wasn't over. It never would be. But for now, they had each other, and that was enough.